Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our webinar for this morning. Great to have you all on board. I know there's still a few people still joining, but we will kick off the session for today. Firstly, I'd just like to welcome you all. Again, we certainly recognise that everybody's probably undertaking a lot of Zoom calls at the moment, so we really do appreciate your attendance in today's session. In terms of the content today, we're going to be hearing from Andy Hiscox from NETSTOCK, and a really appropriate theme in today's world around how we navigate our business around current supply chain challenges. I'm sure it's going to be a great session, looking forward to it. Just in terms of a little bit of housekeeping, you will see that you have a Q&A button within your Zoom interface. Please feel free to ask questions as you go. In fact, we really just do encourage you to ask the questions throughout the session today. And what we'll do is we'll reserve some time at the end of the session to answer all those questions. We'll make sure there's plenty of time to answer those, but keep them flowing through. That'd be fantastic. And that way you can all see the questions that are being asked and we can make sure that we're adding to the conversation. Without any further ado, I'd like to hand over to Andy. Andy, welcome.
Thank you, Stephen. Great to be here, and let's get straight into it then. So what we'll do today is we'll firstly go through a couple of slides, then we'll have a look at some software and we'll come back to some slides. So, most environments we find at this point in time with COVID and all the various supply chain challenges that people are having, these are sort of the typical challenges that people have, and we've kind of ranked them sort of on a basis from minor to major. And as you can see, stockouts generally seem to be one of the biggest problems at the moment because of the extended lead times and so forth with COVID. Also, even though we do have stockouts, people are still ending up with excess because you're finding certain products are not selling as well as they used to prior to COVID. We still find, because a lot of the time people use spreadsheets and other mechanisms to try and do their planning, that's generally time consuming to populate with data and so forth. And then forecast accuracy now becomes even more challenging in this COVID environment because of the changes, the acceleration of sales of some products and the drop off of others. So let's just have a look a little bit of that impact of COVID. So as I said, some items we certainly found with a number of businesses, some items are really starting to take off significantly above how they'd been selling before. And then we have others that have almost just stopped selling completely. So that's clearly a challenge. How do we deal with that? Then in terms of lead times, I think we're probably all experiencing this kind of scenario. We expect the lead time to be around 132 days, but actually on average, it's more like 207 days. And if we had a look at this specific example here, where we're having a look at a set of individual orders, the first one was delivered in 138 days, the next one 153, then 211, and finally we're ending up at about 320-day lead time, which seems kind of outrageous, but those are the sort of things we're hearing and getting back from some of our customers and people in the replenishment space. Other issues that complicate the planning, you might be in a manufacturing environment, so you have a raw material that goes into a variety of different finished goods. If you run out of stock of that raw material, it obviously throws your complete planning process into disruption, and you could stock out of multiple products at the same time. So clearly making sure that we have critical raw materials, components, and packaging available to support our manufacturing process is very important. Another issue that complicates the process is you might have a large distribution network. How do you balance the stock between the various locations, and how do you ensure that you don't get into a situation where you've got excess in some locations, shortages in other, and you're in that process of always trying to rebalance and keep your network stock balanced. Also, you might have a limited budget. So what are you going to spend on? Which products are my most important ones? Which ones are contributing the most to the business? Which ones are moving? Which ones aren't moving as quickly, and which aren't moving at all? So the ability to be able to classify products so that we can focus on the key ones is a critical element. But also, as we talked about a little earlier, the ability to identify which items are critical in my manufacturing process. So obviously, if I have a unique packaging for one type of product, it's not as important as if I have packaging that goes into 20 or 30 different products. And then, no matter what the situation is, we need to realize there's certain fundamental inputs to your planning process which are critical. So, if your vendors always delivered on time and in full, and you could predict exactly what you're going to sell, it'd be really easy. You just match supply and demand, and it could almost be automated. But of course, vendors don't deliver on time, and they do deliver late. And you might have 10, 20, 30,000 different SKUs. So unless you have a mechanism that's actually tracking this and monitoring that performance and understanding where vendors are starting to slip and on which products, then you're missing some key elements or inputs that you need to be able to optimize your inventory process. And then, of course, we need to measure how well we're forecasting, because if we're constantly under forecasting, we're going to need to hold a significant amount of safety stock to protect ourselves against that. If we're constantly over forecasting, then obviously we're going to end up with excess stock. So we need to be able to measure risk in our business, and that's the risk of suppliers delivering late or under delivering, and us underestimating future demand. Now, most environments, you have this scenario: sales are saying, we're just losing sales hand over foot. We're running out of stock of certain items. We just need to hold more stock. We're just not holding enough stock, double the inventory. From a financial perspective, well, there's only a limited budget. There's only so much we can invest in inventory, so we need to invest that very carefully. And then operationally, there's somebody having to try and resolve the conflict between these two business functions. So it's really fundamental that you have an ability to model a variety of different inventory strategies and ensure that whatever strategy you're following is supported by the business. So firstly, of course, what fill rate targets do you want? What products would you like to stock? Then how much money can we afford to invest in inventory? Those are two critical inputs, and you need a capability to be able to enter those to give you a coherent inventory strategy. Otherwise, you're in constant seesaw process with sales and marketing pushing to increase the inventory, finance continually pushing to reduce the inventory because you have too much excess. So unless you have a structure to be able to enter these goals and see how those goals pan out, are they actually achievable, then you're always going to have a problem. So that's from the one side. But from the other side, the structure needs to take into account inventory risk. And as we saw, inventory risk has these two main drivers: how reliably can we forecast, and how good are our vendors at delivering on time and in full. Then, of course, things like the length of the lead time. So if I can buy it locally, clearly I can respond quicker, I have much less risk. But if I'm buying from overseas, and as we saw in that previous example, I showed you where we have in one case, 220-day lead time, clearly my risk is exacerbated significantly by extending that lead time. And then how frequently I review. So if I check every day whether I can order, and I can place orders every day, I can clearly hold less inventory than if I can only reorder, say, once a month. And then any constraints imposed upon me by my vendor are going to have an impact on that as well. So really, the amount of money that you hold in inventory should be driven by your marketing and financial strategies, and it should be optimized to cover the risk in your business. It should then ensure that once you've set those policies and those goals, that every single recommended order actually drives you towards those targets. So let's go and have a look at a few practical examples. So if we just firstly cover some of the fundamental points. So what I'm doing here is I'm looking at an individual product. Firstly, we're just having a look at the forecast. So the blue line here is indicating the historical sales. The brown line is indicating the future. So you need a mechanism that actually creates a baseline forecast for you automatically using a variety of algorithms. And here we can see an algorithm has been selected, a seasonal model with no trend, and it's picked up and created a forecast for us. Then on a daily basis, it should be tracking those forecasts to highlight for us where forecasts are not actually tracking the sales. So we can see here, we're about 29% through the current period. So this is, in this example, August. We're 25% through August, and we've consumed 29% of the current month's forecast. So once we have a forecast for each and every single item, then we need to measure how reliably that forecast is actually tracking the actual sales. And here's just a representation of it's recording all the forecast shots that we have for the individual product, and it's actually showing us how we're going on a monthly basis. What did we forecast? What did we actually sell? The reds are indicating under forecast and the darker color over forecast for us. So from here, we're actually distilling that thing that I talked about, which is the forecast risk. And in this example, actually says it looks like actually we've been over forecasting a little bit. If we over forecast and we sell less than we over forecast, then in fact we can shrink away some of our safety stock because we've actually inadvertently built it into our forecast. But I still have a bit of risk, so that will influence the safety stock, which I'm about to get to in a moment. Now, what about the supply side? Well, in this example, we think it takes 45 days to get stock from our vendor to the ABC warehouse from the Consolidated Tire Company. If we go and have a look at the deliveries from this vendor, we can see that it's actually more like 56 days. And if we just tap down and have a look at the raw data, we can see when did we order it, when did it arrive, how long did that actually take, what did we order and what did we get. If we scroll down a little bit here, we can sort of see we ordered 285 and we got 55. So from a supply side, we have pretty much the reverse scenario where we can see our vendors actually delivering a lot longer than we think, in this case 56 days. And around that 56 days, we also have some variability, because even if we use the 56 days, that wouldn't quite protect us because they delivered in 69 days and they've short supplied once, and that's where the risk element comes in. So now we have a risk profile, and for a desired target fill rate, we actually get a computation that says, well, we need to hold 22 days of safety stock for this product. Now let's just have a look at another product, same fill rate target, 98%. But look at the amount of safety stock we need to hold here. It's almost 4 times as much as the previous one. Why? It becomes obvious when we look down at the data. We think we get the deliveries in 90 days, but you can see here the vendor delivered in 120, then 128, then 133, then 151. It's progressively getting worse. What about the forecasting? Well, this gray band indicates to us a high variability of forecast accuracy, and we can see lately we've under forecast significantly. And in fact, these red indicators indicate to us that we've amended or adjusted the forecasts. So in the NETSTOCK tool, you can adjust forecasts at an item, at a group, at a company level, almost at any level. And here they've made some adjustments, and you can see they didn't do such a good job because they actually missed out by quite a bit. So they have a much higher forecast and a much higher supply risk, and consequently need more safety stock. So step 1 is we need to monitor those risk parameters. Step 2, we'll automatically compute the safety stock based on the fill rate target we want to achieve. So if we looked at this individual item here now, we can see we have a lead time. Sorry, just checking my time. We have a lead time, we have a safety stock, and part of the policy, which I'll show you when we go through in a moment, is we've selected to go for 98% fill rate and to replenish about a month's worth every month for this product. So now you have all the data necessary to do the replenishment. Now, I won't go through all the detailed replenishment here today because we don't really have enough time to cover all of that. But in essence, what's happening is in the background, the system works on an ideal minimum maximum level. It simulates the stock into the future. It breaks the forecast into daily buckets. You can see that changing by day. And then it actually creates a replenishment plan for us. So if we're looking at this specific item, we can see we're over here. Some purchase orders are outstanding. They arrive on those specific dates. They increase our stock. We sell some more. The next order arrives. And then the system kicks in and gives us a plan into the future for the next year. In this case, we're ordering about a month's worth every month to ensure that we stay at the appropriate level to meet the fill rate target. So if we looked at this one, it looks like we've over ordered, and it's actually indicating that to us here. and we're going to be in excess for a while. But if we're looking at the data today here, it's the 8th of August 2011. But in about nearly 2 months' time, maybe 7 weeks' time, we're going to need to order some more to arrive then, and so on into the future. If we now have a look at that alternative item where we need a lot more safety stock, and we look at the projection on this one, we can actually see the level of stock that we're operating at is too low. We need to be operating at a higher level because we're actually going to run out of stock here. The order is going to arrive, and in fact, we're going to run out again. So in this example here, it's saying based on the risk of this item, the fact that the vendor's not delivering that well and we're not forecasting it that well, we need more safety stock. We need to push ourselves to hold a higher level of inventory to support this. So by setting the appropriate stock levels for every single item based on its risk profile and based on our desired fill rate target, the system is now computing the optimum level of stock for us to hold. And of course, this needs to be dynamic. It needs to be automated for every single item because it needs to respond to the changes that are taking place in the marketplace. So if some vendors starting to deliver better, then we might be able to shrink the safety stock. If they're starting to shift outwards, then we're going to need to increase the safety stock. And so the software needs to respond to that type of thing automatically. Now let's raise that up a little bit and have a look, or maybe look at some other scenarios. So here's a product which actually doesn't sell in its own right. It could do, but it has no forecast, but it's part of a bill of materials. And here we can see the bill of materials structure. This product goes into a variety of these products. They also have other products and packaging and maybe some things that go into these finished goods. But we can see that it has this dependent demand based on what I'm expecting to manufacture of the finished product and how it's going to consume this raw material. And we can see on this specific item here, we think we get the stock in 132 days. But if we have a look, we can see that on average, it's more like 207 days. And we've got that significant risk here because we can see that the lead times are starting to blow out significantly. So if we had a look at this item and where we stand with this one, we can see we're over here today. And what the software is actually telling us is we need to order a significant boost to keep our inventories at the right level. You can see how we're going to be replenishing this product into the future, but we need to order a lot at the moment to bring ourselves back to the appropriate levels to protect ourselves against the fact that we're probably under forecasting this product and that our vendor is starting to deliver quite badly. And of course, this item is a component or raw material that feeds into a number of different finished goods here. So if we run out of stock of this, we're not going to be able to manufacture any of those products. I see there are a couple of questions building up. We'll get to those when we get to the Q&A session, but please keep the questions coming. I'm more than happy to answer a whole variety of different scenarios. Now let's just have a look at a situation where we have a distribution center that supplies a variety of locations. So this is a central store. This store actually supplies all of these branches for this specific product. And we can see small branch 1, 2, 3, the remote store and an old main branch. And as we're looking here, we can see the demand patterns against each of these and so forth. We can also see the balance of inventory across the network. So where we've got excess, where we're currently out of stock and so forth. Now, if we have a look at this product, this is actually a manufactured product. We can see it's got quite a long lead time. It needs a reasonable amount of safety stock. And in this example, we're replenishing it about every 2 weeks. So we can see we get quite a few recommended orders every single week. And by the way, you can see these recommended orders are quite rounded, and that will all have to do with whatever constraints you may have. So in this example, when we manufacture this, we have to make 1,000 and we have to manufacture in multiples of 500. So here we can kind of see the plan for this. But when we look at this, we can see that it actually has 2 streams of demand. I sell from my central distribution point. So there's my sales forecast, but I also distribute to my network. Now let's have a look and dive into that in a little bit more detail. So if we look down here, you can see what's happening. Immediately, it's also balancing your stock, because you can see here it's saying, look, we may be selling stock from the remote store, but we're actually a little bit of excess there. So there's no demand rolled up from that location because they're overstocked. Here you can see we're overstocked there as well, but this branch does need stock. So firstly, we need the system to automatically compute the recommended replenishment plan for each location based on the balance of its inventory at that location, and rolling the demand or dependent demand up to the central warehouse level. But also, there's something that's pretty important in terms of a fundamental principle here. This location can get stock quite quickly from the central store, in 5 days, in fact. So consequently, when the system is computing the safe stock, says, I don't need to hold a lot of safety stock here because I can get stock quite quickly. My lead time is short. By the same token, I want to replenish this location quite frequently. So I'm sending them stock about every 7 days. So when we look at the projection here, we can see there are a lot more recommendations for automated transfers to this location far more frequently. But the key thing here, of course, is when you have buying stock from overseas and then you're distributing to your network, or if you're manufacturing it and you've got a long lead time, but you can distribute quite quickly to your locations, what you want to try and do is disperse or transfer the stock at the latest possible point. So that's the idea of consolidating stock at the central warehouse and then shipping it out at the last point. Why? Because the further into the future you try to predict your forecast, the less likely it is to be accurate. The closer to the current, you have a better feel, you have the period to date sales, so consequently you're likely to be more correct. In other words, if I'm buying stuff from overseas and it takes 3 or 4 months to get stock from there, and I've got to replenish Brisbane and Adelaide and Victoria and so forth, and at the point in time when I'm placing that order on overseas, 3 or 4 months into the future, we're selling really strongly in Melbourne, but we're not selling so strongly in Adelaide. If we distribute the stock at that point, or we allocate the stock at that point, we're actually making a mistake. Because what happens if stock drops off in Melbourne and then accelerates in Adelaide? We want to consolidate that stock at the central location and distribute at the last possible moment. And of course, if I over forecast somewhere and I under forecast somewhere else, when I add them together at the top level, it actually balances itself out. So by having a distribution structure that's automatically connected to all of the locations, it's constantly rebalancing the demand patterns across those different locations and ensuring that we optimize across the network. Okay, let's have a look now at how do we decide what we should invest in. So one of the first things we always try to do is try and understand the movement of our products in two directions. One is in terms of how much value are they bringing into the business, and the other in terms of how are they actually selling in terms of velocity or unit movement. So the software will classify for us products into ABC, into high, medium, low. ABC is a typical type Pareto analysis, which you can base on your historical demand or your future forecast. You can weight on any of these factors, either cost price, selling price, or margin, and you can put some percentages in. We can do the same thing here with the velocity of the item, removing the value weighting. And then what this does for us is it creates a 9-block grid that looks like this. So across the top here, I have my items that are contributing 80% to my turnover. And down here, I've got my fastest movers accounting for 80% of my volume or unit movement. So clearly these products here are my most important products. They're in the fastest moving and the highest contributing category. But the idea of putting it in this 9-block grid, which of course is dynamic based on how products sell. If they sell more, they move up the grid. If they sell down, they move. If they're starting to sell less, they move down. But the idea of putting it into this 9-block grid is because each of these little blocks has a unique characteristic. So if you look here, these are obviously my most important. But what about these? These items are moving really quickly, but they're in the bottom 4% of contribution to the business. So here we can see I'm only selling about 11K a month or consuming 11K a month into production. And over here, it's about 1.5 million. So in this case, if I bought 3 or 4 or 5 months worth of stock, 3 months is only $36,000. Whereas if I buy 1 week's worth here, I'm getting close to $400,000 worth of inventory. So now it becomes clear in terms of the types of policies we should set for each of these little sections. So here, for example, these products are moving. They might not be contributing a lot to the business, but they are important. So they might be important widgets for manufacturing, or they're small things that people always expect you to have. So the demand is up there, but not bringing you a lot of money. So we can then, of course, order larger days of cover, like 3 or 4 months. As I said, we're only ordering $36,000, and we can target the highest level of fill rate. Now, what does this do? This means we never run out of stock of it. We order it infrequently, and we don't inflate our inventory. We get a triple win by setting the appropriate policy for these items. What about these products? Well, these products we'd like to order as frequently as we can. Apologies. As frequently as we can, because it costs us a lot to buy these. And surely we want 99.99% fill rate for these. Well, maybe we can't afford that. So this is the key now. We can now set the appropriate policies for these different categories. These are my slow-moving expensive. These are products that are probably unique. People might be prepared to wait for these because they're specialist items. What about these? These are the products that are not moving or contributing. So that's the range rationalization. You can get a quick view of how much falls into each of these categories. So in that red zone, a lot of product that we need to have a look at. And of course, we could click on and get a list of those if we want. We can even download them to Excel. We can also see there's quite a bit of value of stock in that category, and all the demand is actually here. So now what we can do is have a look in here and go and set some policy appropriate for those categories of items. So down here, we're going to order 90 days worth of stock. We're going to target the highest level of fill rate. Over here, maybe we're going to try and order stock every 2 weeks, and we're going to target, let's say we'll start with 99. Maybe we can't afford 99.99 at this point, but of course we can model it. So we can now put in whatever we want. We can set differently for different locations, or if we want to set it for the same for all of our warehouses, we can do that by just clicking that button. And now every single product will pick up some policy, a cycle, a fill rate target related to the policy that we set for that specific category. Now, once we've done that, we can then see what the outcome of that policy is. So if we just scroll down here, we can actually have a look and see, you know, if I just sort of focused maybe on these A highs here, we've currently got 2.6 million, but in fact, we can get away with 2.5 million. We're targeting 98, but we're only getting 95. So by balancing the inventory better, we can get a significant improvement in our fill rate, but we don't have to have more stock than we currently have. So we might say, all right, those A highs, actually, we'd like to target a higher fill rate. So let's do that. Let's go for 99. Sorry, let's go for 99.99% of those. I don't know why it's not changing. Here we go. Let's do that. Let's up the quantities and let's apply that policy. So now what I'm doing is I've selected those specific set of items. I've targeted a higher fill rate on those. And now we're going to see the outcome of setting that policy. Now, in this example, I've just selected that specific group, my A highs. But of course, we could do things like targeting our packaging or our raw materials. We could go and select those and set those at very high fill rates and maybe order larger quantities of those as well. So we have that capability to set and play with these parameters that actually drive our inventory. So now we can have a look, you know, to go from 98% fill rate to 99.99% fill rate is about 1.9% fill rate improvement. We actually have to invest about $500,000 in this group of these 138 products. So now we can actually play with our policies and set the appropriate policies for the specific products that we're looking at. And once we've set those policies, we can get the outcomes. Now, just so that we're clear here, this is creating an ideal model for the product. So it's looking at the fill rate target we want, how much safety stock we should hold, setting the appropriate safety stock, looking at that forecast in the future, and working out how we're going to replenish that, and then creating an ideal inventory model for us, like we saw in those little graphics that I showed you here, where it actually shows us what level of stock we should be holding for this product into the future. Now, it's doing that for each and every single item. And if we quickly just click on our dashboards here, it's going to evaluate all of our products for us and also tell us what categories that they fall into. So when we were looking at that specific scenario here, and we're saying, well, we can get away with 3 million, our inventory might not all be balanced, but if we could get them in balance, that's the amount of inventory we need to hold. So we can get a quick view. So how many of our products are in perfect balance? So here we can see 167 of my products are in perfect balance. They're not quite at the target fill rate. Well, we did up the fill rate now, and obviously it takes a bit of time to get there, but there were some products that were actually outside the ideal profiles before and are now sitting inside the ideal profile and will very quickly move towards these fill rate targets. So these are all balanced. But what about these? So there's 59 of my top selling products where I'm holding probably 15 or more times too little inventory. And you can see the fill rate target I'm getting and the potential lost sales that I'm going to have. So we're going to need to invest in those products and bring our inventory up in those. Same with these. These ones, I'm below my ideal levels. I'm going to have some potential stockouts. I need to invest some here. And as I said, with anything you can click, you can always get a full list of these products. You can download them into Excel. Very easy to get all the information around the different categories. So those ones are short, but we also have some where we've potentially overordered. So here you can see I'm probably holding double what I need. And I've ordered some more. So I'm holding a lot more than I need here, and I've ordered some more. So in this case, you probably want to go and have a look at these orders, and we'll check those out when we go and have a look at the dashboard. And these might be areas where we'd want to cancel or delay some of those orders. What about these products? So here I'm probably holding 4 times what I need. And clearly the excess and the surplus items are not, we can't just wave a wand and get rid of excess. It's going to take time for that excess to come down. So if we immediately increase our inventory for the stockouts and the potential stockouts, and we have some items that have a lot of excess, stock may go up before it goes down. So once we've set our policy and we've modeled it, what we now need to go and do is have a look at a future projection to see if the policies we've set are going to take us where we'd like to go. So just quickly before we go and look at that policy modeling, just checking the time. Yes, we've still got a bit of time. We'll just go and have a look at an excess stock item quickly just to understand this. So here, for example, you can see here's a product. And if we have a look at the sales of this product, we can actually see that the demand has dropped off quite a bit from the peak of that year. And that year we sold 52. But, you know, we're not selling that much overall. We sold 29 last year and we're forecasting to do 36 this year. But we have 178 in stock. So we've actually got almost 3 years worth of stock. So even if we sell at the increased rate this year, it's going to take us 3 years to get this down. So this is an example of an item where if we could, we would try and return the stock to the vendor or maybe disassemble this and sell the spare parts. You know, this is something we want to try and attack. So I'll get back to this dashboard in a moment. Let's now go and have a look at our future projections. So here's an example. So once we've set our policy, what the system will do, as we saw by item, it'll simulate into the future by day. For the next, actually now we can simulate 2 years into the future by day. It'll simulate a plan of what we need to replenish, how much we need to replenish, and what's going to happen to our inventory if we do that. So here's an example where things don't look too rosy. We currently have 52.9 million. Stock will come down, but if we order according to the plan, we're actually going to end up with $75 million in stock. So that's what we need to invest to get us to this target of 97% fill rate. Now, if we plan not on investing in inventory, then that's going to be a problem. So let's investigate this and see why it's asking us to invest so much. Well, firstly, we're going from 84% to 97%. Maybe we can't afford that. Maybe we can't afford a 13% improvement in fill rate. Secondly, it looks like the sales guys have got hold of this forecast. We're starting at 13 million and we're planning up to 46.9 million per month. So maybe we've been a little bit optimistic with the forecasts here. But again, we've got all the exception reports that can highlight for us potentially where we're going to over forecast and so forth, and we can go and have a look at those. If this is correct, now we can see how much money we're going to need to spend month on month into the future to support this. Now, if you want to delve down and have a look at any more detail, of course, we can do that. So let's see here. Here we're starting with 51 million. If we replenish according to the recommended plan, as we said, we're going to get up to 75. And then by the end of the year, we'll have come down a little bit. Not by much, a couple of million, not that exciting. But if we have a look here, we can see that half of our current stock is in excess. And what's even worse, by November, it's going to have gone up by just under $11 million. So what this is telling me is we have a lot of stock on order that we don't need. If we could cancel that $11 million today, then that 69 wouldn't be 69. That point would be obviously 58, which sounds a lot better. And if I took in $11 million out of this closing stock, I'll be ending up with 39 million. That doesn't seem too bad, right? Going from 52 million down to 39 million. So clearly we need to do something about this excess. We need to attack that. And maybe we need to cancel and delay some of those orders that we've got in the pipeline we really don't need. So there's a scenario where we actually have a picture that doesn't look too rosy. Let's look at one where we look in much better shape than before. Sorry, my timer keeps switching off. And here we can see this looks far more encouraging. You know, we're starting at 8.7 million. We are going to increase a little bit to 8.8, but by the end of the year, we'll have taken 20% out of stock and we would have gone from 86% to 96%. So we're going to get over an 11% improvement in fill rate, and we're going to get close to a 20% reduction in inventory. This looks pretty good. We're going to need to spend some more because we're planning to sell some more, and we can sort of see that going into the future. So this looks pretty good. So once we've set the policy, we run this budget looks good. Now we can actually go and do the replenishment. I won't go through the replenishment in this webinar because we really don't have time to kind of cover that, but we can clearly just click on the button and it will generate a recommended replenishment plan by vendor into the future, telling us exactly what to buy. So if I just quickly did this and sort of said, well, let's look at this apparel co, I want to create the order. I would click on that. It would give me the plan into the future of exactly what I need to order and what my forecasts look like and so on and so forth. And you can, of course, when you hover over this, get a view into the future of what the plan should be for the next 12 months. If you want a report that shows you by month, by week, by day for the next year, what you need to replenish for each item, you can actually just click and get that as an output as well. All right, so now let's go back to the dashboards. And then once we've done that, we'll go through a few more slides and then we'll get on to the questions. So the dashboard, so as we've seen now, we've got the policy, the ability to model policy, set policy, then see the predicted outcomes of that policy that we've set and how that's going to influence our stock into the future. What the dashboard does for us is monitor our performance. So it tells us where we are today, where we are when we started in terms of actual stock and fill rate. It also creates a model based on all of that policy and the target fill rate. Then every recommended order that the system generates for us drives us to our model. By the same token, it takes us from that 80% fill rate, in this case, up to the 86.7, but it's now continually driving us towards that goal. So we can see over the last number of days, 13 days as an example, or the last 13 weeks, or the last 13 months, if we choose to look at it in months, of where we started, how we're tracking, and we can see we're going in the right direction. Stock is coming down, fill rate is coming up, but we haven't achieved our goals yet. And this is what these KPIs show us here. They're showing us where we have excess, how we've tracked with our excess, how much excess we currently have, my worst 5 offenders always, same thing with surplus stock, where I'm out of stock, and my worst potential stock out items. As we said, on anything, if you want to click on something, it'll highlight for you all of your products. And if you want to, you can download them into Excel. We won't go through that in the session. It gives you some detailed reports, the day you're going to run out of stock, how many days you're going to be out of stock for, etc., what you need to expedite, and all that type of information. Okay, so now we've seen how we set policy, how we monitor our performance, how we're tracking some of those key fundamental things, how well we're forecasting, how good our vendors are delivering on time and in full. We've looked at that down at the item level, but we haven't looked at that at the summary level, which of course we can do. Let's now flip back out of the software and just get a quick summary of what we went through in the session. So fundamental requirements, we need to be able to measure inventory risk, both from a forecasting and a supply perspective. If we're not doing that, you have no idea really of how much inventory you need to hold and which are the items that are causing you the biggest problems. Then we need to be able to model the different inventory strategies so we can get a prediction into the future as to, if we implement the strategy, what's actually going to happen to my inventory going forward. Then we need to monitor our performance, as we saw on the dashboard. So the dashboards, I was looking at a specific warehouse, but of course you'll get dashboards for every location and at a national level, and it's constantly tracking, very quick and easy to see, are we actually improving and going in the right direction, and do we have any problems in any specific areas? And then obviously you need the appropriate tools to be able to do that. So you need to have the forecasting, the supply, the policy setting, the recommended replenishment plan. It needs to take account of the bill of materials and the distributions planning requirements. And then you need all of those other functions where it generates recommended replenishment by location, recommended transfers, recommended manufacturing plans, and so forth. And then all of the various other facilities for modeling and predicting our inventory into the future. Okay, that kind of concludes the base webinar for today. I see there's quite a few questions, so let's go and have a look at some of these. Maybe Stephen, if you wanted to start reading them out and I could kind of respond to them, it might be the easiest.
Absolutely, that was fantastic, Andy. So thank you for that. We've got a question here just in terms of the introduction of new product lines. With clients who introduce new products regularly, how can NETSTOCK serve to forecast against those new product lines?
Excellent. All right, so there's a couple of things. Number one, firstly, it identifies for you the new products on your dashboards. I didn't get to that, but it'll tell you the minute a new product appears. As before, you can click and get the full list, and then you can pick up individual products, and you can just let me sort this. I'll sort this the other way around and just pick this up. You can then pick up a new product and you can manually enter any forecasts you would like into those products. You can enter by period, or you can select and just put a number in and just apply that number as a starting point. So that's one mechanism for creating forecasts. Another mechanism that we have is you can link product, and you can link product in a variety of different ways. So let's talk about where you're superseding product. So this is a scenario where I'm going to supersede 503 by product 502. Now, this supersession facility can have multiple feeding into one. It can have many ratios feeding into one. But essentially, the idea here is if I click on this, you can see the new product has only started to sell a little bit of July and a little bit of August. And in fact, if we tried to forecast that, we probably would have got a flat line going that way. But because we linked it to its predecessor, it has now created a more realistic future kind of forecast on which we can base our planning on. Now, we can link a product before it's even started selling, and it'll automatically get a forecast, and then it will tell us what to buy to match that forecast. So this is for superseded items, but we can also link like for like. So we might say, look, I've got this product, I've got another product, I'm not replacing it, but I believe that this new product will sell like the old product. So I'd like to link them and use the history of that old one to help forecast the new one. So that's how we deal with new products. We also have, sorry, Steve, one more mechanism. If you use our advanced forecasting module and you're a seasonal kind of business, it'll establish seasonal profiles by group. And if an item starts to sell and has only been selling for a few days, it will take that daily selling rate and it will convert it into a seasonal profile and actually create a seasonal forecast for you, even though you've only got a couple of days worth of history. So the software will do that for you as well.
That's great, Andy. Thank you. Another question here. We have some periods where lead times and sales were heavily affected by COVID. How can NETSTOCK handle this? And I know that you've kind of addressed that in some part, Andy, but can you maybe just give a little bit of a summary around how NETSTOCK kind of helps that changing risk profile?
Sure. Just got to... Okay. So we have the ability at a macro level to do some event correction. So we might say, you know, June and July were heavily impacted by COVID, and I would like to represent actually a year before that as a representation of the sales for that period. So we can actually use different sales periods to replace other sales periods in the forecasting as one thing. That's one mechanism. We can also then look at forecast at a summary level and make macro kind of adjustments. So, you know, for example, where, let me just do this here. I'm going to select items with some frozen forecasts. Here's been a scenario where we've made some adjustments. So here, people have felt that, you know, we could have sold a lot more, but actually COVID really impacted us. And now we're going to have a big uplift. And you can see that actually manually overridden the forecast. So you can make adjustments. Let me just clear this filter at this top line level as well. And you can allow the software to replace specific periods. So for example, here, if I wanted to make a change to adjusting forecasts here, I could come along and say, look, between that and that period, I expect to have an increase. Let's model that change. And I can now see the change at a graphical level. I can apply that change, or I can even step through the items and have a look at those ones that I've manually adjusted. I can download them into Excel and adjust them and upload them back. So there's many different ways in which we can deal with this. And in fact, the software also has some mechanisms which we won't have time to go through now, but it can record the days that you ran out of stock. It can use those stock out days to boost future forecasts. It can also record one-off peaks and chop those out of the future forecast. So there's many mechanisms within the software that enable us to fine-tune how we deal with historical sales information.
That's great, Andy. Thank you. Another question here about integration into advanced. Firstly, just to start off with, NETSTOCK is integrated into both MYB EXO and MYB Advanced. There's a specific question here, Andy, about how NETSTOCK syncs with MYB Advanced and how data is mirrored, updated, and exported between the two. Yep. Just to firstly identify, NETSTOCK integrates with Advanced via both the APIs and through OData. Did you want to expand on that a little bit, Andy?
Yeah, sure. So that's the beauty. You know, literally what I've shown you in the demo is available literally within a day of us connecting to environment. So we have in terms of advanced, we have a pre-built API. We load that API, probably takes us a couple of hours to a day, depending on the complexity in your environment, to load that up. And then data is flowing automatically out of advanced into the cloud. Generally, this flows overnight, but you can run it on demand. You can schedule it to run more frequently. This really depends on the size of your data. So for example, if you had 5,000 SKUs and you had 5 warehouses, that's 25,000 skulls across all. That's a reasonably small data set. An on-demand refresh for that would take probably 5 minutes if you wanted to run 5 to 10 minutes max to run an update. But it always refreshes automatically overnight. In terms of sending data back, the system will create 3 types of recommendations: recommended works orders, recommended purchase orders, and recommended transfers. And you can review and adjust those in NETSTOCK, press a demand button, and they will go back on demand into advanced or EXO and create the actual purchase order, actual transfer, and actual works order. Now, sorry, Stephen, maybe I didn't explain this in detail. This takes all the relevant data out of advanced: supply information, stock, purchase orders, custom orders, cost, selling price, groups, sales, etc., etc. Everything we need automatically flows through from advanced into NETSTOCK, and then we send back into advanced or EXO those 3 types of transactions.
Fantastic. That's great, Andy. Another question here from Chris. We've sold out of inventory up to 2 or 3 shipments away, possibly over 2 or 4 forward periods, 2 to 4 months of forward periods. We need to allow our customers to know the next available date of free stock. How could NETSTOCK help with this? Yeah,
so in terms of allocating stock into the future, as long as we have expectations in terms of future, that's not quite the question was asked, but I'll just show this quickly anyway. So what NETSTOCK is doing into the future, remember, is it's predicting exactly what the stock levels are going to look like and where stock is going to arrive, and how much stock is going to be available. So remember when we looked at that first item here, when we looked at this one, it's predicting all the way into the future what my stock's going to look like. So if you had a look at this little table here, you can see here's my current stock. In fact, I'm going to run out of stock on this date, and I'm going to be out of stock until this point, and now an order's going to arrive and I'm going to have some available stock into the future. Obviously, as we start to, as I showed in this example, collect customer orders or even promos that we might have planned for the future, you'll be able to see this. It's allocating that stock at that point into the future, and we can see when how much available stock we've got and how the stock is going to adjust itself. Now, this is quite a complicated topic, so if there's some real interest, more than happy to have an offline session to talk about this in some real detail. But absolutely, this is always giving us a long-range view into the future, by day actually for the next 2 years now, and it'll highlight what future orders you may have, how that's going to consume stock, where you're going to run short of stock, and where we can start to in future maybe allocate some to some future custom orders if needed.
That's great, Andy. Thank you so much. A question here with regards to how NETSTOCK supports the job costing module within MYOB. Just to confirm, NETSTOCK absolutely does see the demand that comes through job costing and can forecast and create purchase orders for replenishment based on that visible demand. Did you want to add anything to that, Andy?
No, I think that's absolutely right. So essentially in NETSTOCK, we can operate in a variety of ways. Okay, so one is dependent demand or consumption. So for example, one of our customers, they manufacture, but their bills of materials are constantly changing. They don't know what the finished goods going to be. It all depends on the customer order, their specific requirements. They're generally making to order, right? But the raw materials have got 6, 7, 8 month lead time, so they need to forecast and consume that. So in their case, you can't blow it through a bill of material as dependent demand. We have to take the consumption numbers, and we use the consumption of the raw materials to forecast the raw material purchases. So we can deal with both scenarios, either consumption of raw materials or dependent demand blown through a bill of materials. So if it's job costing and you've got a job shop and you're consuming raw materials, absolutely we can use consumption. If you've got a BOM and you want to forecast the finished product and blow the demand as dependent demand through the bill to the components and raw materials, absolutely we deal with that. So it deals with both scenarios.
Fantastic, that's great. Another question here in terms of a client that's trying to maximize the filling of containers, particularly due to these issues with longer lead times from vendors. Yes. How does NETSTOCK support this, Andy?
Yeah, that's a very good question. We have a standard functionality in the system where we can actually fill containers. So maybe what we should do is quickly load this up, and I can see we're running out of time, but and again, made a mistake, apologies. The software has a module that helps us actually fill containers. So let's take a look at this little example here. Just want to quickly sort this. Yep. Okay. So come on. Oh, that's better. This happens to be a production line, but it's exactly the same concept as an external vendor, right? And here you can see it's telling us for against this production line how many products we're going to order, the quantity, the value, then the volume and the weight. Okay, so if we have volume for containers or weight, or we've somehow related our product to either volume or weight or number of units that fit in a container, then we can actually see here, like let's say as just an example, we need to get the volume to 56 cubes or to 60 cubes. Then what we can do is from the front end, we can actually look forward and say, well, let's order enough for the next 7 days, or let's order enough for the next 10 days. Now you can see I'm approaching that volume. So you can actually play with this. Let's go to 14 days. Now you can see I've gone past. So let's stick with 10 days as a starting point. Now I create that order. It now brings up everything I need to order. I can see the cubics and weight per item. So I can change any item and it'll immediately change it there. But I can also go into this function and say, you know what? I actually know the volume of the container. Stick the volume in, click solve. It then prorates everything to fit into the container. If it's short of stock, it brings new items in to fill the container. So it's got an optimization which can work on either units, volume, or weight, or on a total cost constraint for a specific order. And in that way, we help people fill containers. A lot of our customers use this facility.
That's great, Andy. And I think that's it for questions. Did you want to just cover off the last couple of slides, please?
Yes, absolutely. Sorry, where did we get to? We got to this. So lastly, the only slide that we really need to go through was this. You know, if people are interested, the best way really is to book a personalized demo where we'll actually go through your environment in detail. If you do that before the 30th of October, and then you proceed with the project before the 20th of December, we'll give you a 20% discount on the implementation fee. But even so, you know, I think a demo, if you're interested, is probably the way to go, because then we customize it to your environment and you can ask any specific questions you would like. And obviously we go into much more detail in terms of replenishment and so forth.
Fantastic.
Much it.
That's great, Andy. Look, thank you so much. Good to see some questions coming through from the participants, and hopefully that's addressed all the questions that you have. If there are any sort of further questions, or if you do want to reach out to arrange an introduction and actually do a one-on-one demonstration, please don't hesitate to reach out to your Enterprise or Kilimanjaro account manager, or you can also reach out to Brad Wood directly on those email addresses on the screen there. We look forward to continuing the conversation. Thanks again to Andy, and thank you all for attending. Really do appreciate it. Have yourselves a fantastic day.
Thank you, Stephen. Cheers. Bye-bye, everybody.